Welcome back to another episode of the Super Data Brothers Show live from Coalesce 2023. I am here with Matt Housley. Matt.
Are we actually live? Are we streaming right now?
No.
All right. Sorry, cat's out of that bag, I guess. But,
yeah, so I'm here with Matt, co-author of Fundamentals of Data Engineering. Matt, what do you think of the conference so far?
I'm having a really good time. I mean, for me, it's just mostly about all the connections and conversations. I've been to a couple of good talks as well, and so, yeah.
Yeah, that's
awesome.
awesome.
Yourself, what's your impression?
It's good. You know, so far, my impression of it overall is like, it's very interesting. This is almost a year that feels like DBT's growing up a little bit.
Yeah.
The customers here are a little bigger. Problems it's solving are a little more complex. If you look at the features they announced, you know, I've heard a number of people say like, "Oh, DBT's going enterprise," right? And
which you kind of have to, right?
Yeah.
And every company gets flack for that. But if you're going to make money in a serious way in the enterprise space, you have to go enterprise.
Right. I mean, that's where the big money is to be made.
Yeah.
And so
that's how you pay for conferences like this. Frankly, it's
exactly.
not cheap.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, one of the things I want to talk to you about, and we were on Upsolver's panel yesterday.
Yeah.
So check that out on Upsolver's LinkedIn channel if you haven't. It was a very interesting conversation about kind of the past and future of data integration. But I want to talk to you a little bit about your perspective on kind of, you know, the data eras that we've lived through and kind of, you know, what we're on the cusp of now, right? So like if you were to sum up the last, 7-10 years of data innovation, how would you divide things and what were the main problems you think we were trying to solve?
I mean, if we're talking 10 years, then that caught the tail end of what I still call the big data era, where everyone was all about Hadoop. And then we kind of transitioned into running Hadoop on the cloud.
Yeah.
And then basically at this point, Jordan Tagani said this in his talk today, Hadoop has mostly gone away. It's kind of a component here and there in a few things, but no one is excited about Hadoop anymore.
Right.
And then we shifted to the modern data stack era, for lack of a better term, which is basically cloud data warehouses coupled with various management tools that run on top. And so DBT is very much considered to be part of that modern data stack. I don't know, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I mean, I agree, and it's interesting. You know, I focus kind of more on the BI side of things, and so, you know, but we really saw that as well. And if I think back in time, you know, there was an era where I knew somebody at Oracle, and the idea then was like, which of course, ultimate enterprise company, but
still an ultimate enterprise company. Yeah.
The idea then was that was being espoused in kind of the big data era from a BI perspective is like, we're just going to cram unlimited data into the lake, and we'll do some map reduce and that sort of thing. But really, what we're going to do is we're just going to cram unlimited data in the lake, and we're just going to put a thin visualization layer on top of it. And that's going to be it, right? And we'll be done. And I think it has evolved to be much more about, you know, you've got hundreds of SaaS applications, cloud applications that you need to pull data in from. And then from a BI perspective, it's like, you know, how do we, I mean, it's almost like the classic problem of like, how do I get all this data to relate to one another? How do I get into a format that I can report on, and then what report will actually be meaningful to an end user?
And then consistency, right? So consistency of metrics remains a problem. It's been a problem since the 90s.
Yeah.
Probably got worse with the data lake, and we're still struggling with it.
And it felt like, to me, like it kind of dropped off for a while.
Yeah.
Like it was just about, people were so, I don't know, impressed, or maybe there was genuinely so much value, although I think that's debatable to be had from just, like, look at how much data we can crunch.
Yeah.
That the idea that we needed to shape it into something before it could be useful, to some degree, fell by the wayside.
Right, and I think a lot of what happened, and we see this over and over again in a variety of domains, but a new tool will come out, and then people using that tool pretend that history doesn't exist anymore. And so if you think about it, big data engineers in the peak big data world usually didn't come from like a data warehousing background or an Oracle background or anything else. And so they sort of forgot all the lessons that we've been learning about business intelligence, data warehousing since, you know, for 20 years at least.
Yeah.
And then we had to relearn all those same lessons. And that's where we've evolved from the data lake to the data lakehouse, meaning, oh, we need governance, we need standard metrics, maybe we need a metrics layer, we need schema management, we need table management rather than just a bunch of files.
Exactly. God forbid we build a star schema, right?
Right.
You know, I had an experience at this conference last year when it was in New Orleans where one of their consulting partners was doing a presentation called that was Back to the Future themed. Like they dressed up like Doc and Marty McFly, and actually what the presentation was about was they were introducing the DBT audience to Ralph Kimball.
Yeah. So a year ago, I heard this secondhand, but someone was sitting in this talk at Coalesce, at DBT Coalesce, and the speaker talked about how your DBT model is not a data model. And the people in the audience were like looking this up, like, oh, what's a data model?
Yeah, they were. They absolutely were, right? It was remarkable. Yeah, I was standing in the back of the room, just observing. I could see all the laptops open and people on Amazon ordering the data warehouse toolkit, right? So that was how. Now, of course, there were downsides to that way of doing things, right? It was slow, like structuring the data in a dimensional format takes time, it takes skill. And then, do you think, kind of one of the things that is maybe trying to answer that is you see this idea of data as a product and concepts like data mesh and that sort of thing where, we are going to be preparing data for consumption. We're not going to leave it in its raw format, but we're going to take some domain-oriented architecture. We're going to distribute it amongst domain teams. Yeah. Do you see people adopting these ideas, and where do you think that's headed?
I don't think the new definitive notion of data modeling has yet been invented. And what I mean by that is that it's not just about technology, but often new tools do require new approaches, right?
Yeah.
And so columnar databases and everything that you use, Snowflake, BigQuery, Spark, is basically columnar now, need a somewhat different approach. That doesn't mean that they're formally denormalized. That was kind of the answer in the early days.
Yeah.
But we do need to rethink how we're doing data modeling. And I think if you look back at the 90s, I think Inman's Building the Data Warehouse came out like in the late 90s. And data warehousing had been around for a while by then. And so it took a while, like it wasn't called data warehousing, but basically that idea had been around for a while. And it took a while for people to move in and say, all right, we need to define some standards and here's some big ideas and let's build this out. And I think we're in the same era for whatever you want to call it, the modern data stack or cloud data, where we have all these great tools and now we need thought leaders to define exactly what the new approach to data modeling is that builds on old approaches but is updated enough to work better with the modern tools that we have.
Yeah.
And I think data mesh did put a stake in the ground. I think there's more work that needs to be done around that idea to fully fill it out, basically.
Yeah. I mean, it's really interesting. I'm a fan of the ideas behind data mesh, but to see how they live in implementation is going to be eye-opening. And I almost feel like I don't know if you've noticed this, but if you look at kind of the 4 pillars of data mesh that Zhamak outlines in the book, the one that it seems to me people have most grabbed onto is almost data as a product, like that piece of it. Maybe a lot of people read Zhamak's book and they said, this is huge, some of it's over my head, I don't know if I can do this, but this piece, this data as a product piece, this I can do. Yeah, and so, maybe that will be an integral part of or maybe the first part of what we see of kind of the emerging paradigm, I don't know. But.
And I think another thing that's kind of missing from the book, and it's not to say that it's not a really good foundation, but it doesn't really tell you how to build a platform from an organizational perspective.
Yeah.
And I think we're coming around to this idea that yes, you want independence of teams building their data. We don't want to be fully back in the command and control data warehouse era where one team controls other people's data, but you also don't all want to be building your own Spark clusters or something. That's just like way too much repeated effort. And so you want to have a common platform where all these teams can operate together and really manage their own data sets and share them. Yeah,
absolutely. Cool. All right, so last question. What advice do you have? I ask this to almost everybody. So, what advice do you have for a young person who's entering data right now, or maybe someone who's looking to make a career transition into data? What do you think they should focus on to help ease that transition and be successful as a data professional?
Yeah, so I think the table stakes, kind of the baseline, is just to start learning some tools, things like DBT and Snowflake and Spark, for example. But I think where people get stuck in their careers is they learn a tool, but then they don't really learn the kind of architectural or deeper ideas around it. And so that's the next step from my perspective. In fact, the tools you choose are less important than understanding data concepts and the data ecosystem. So for example, if I'm looking to hire someone and they come to me and they say, I have all these great projects on BigQuery and SQL, and I'm not going to tell them like, hey, I want Snowflake, I'm not going to hire you. As long as I can see that they understand fundamental concepts of data, I'm going to understand that I can then retrain them on the specific tool I'm using. But then I really want to see that they're doing things like reading the classics, like reading Building the Data Warehouse, and staying on top of thought leadership, and understanding like the more organizational aspects of how data is used within organizations. And that's what's really going to move their career forward. I mean, you have to stay current on technology, but I want you to really understand how data is used within a business, what the major issues are, like data quality, how we think about scale, how you think about things like cost management, and so on.
Yeah. So if you understand the fundamentals, the technology will come and go.
Right. And the important thing to understand is that we sometimes mistake technology for the fundamentals, but that's not the fundamentals.
Right.
Like, the fundamentals cut across a lot of different technologies, actually.
Awesome.
And you expect to transition a few times in your career. That's the reality.
Sure. I mean, I started my career, I was a Cognos guy.
Right.
Back in the day, right?
And you mentioned like Oracle, Exadata, or something like that.
I mean, I can remember when the the new Exadata blade came in, and we were all standing around it in a cubicle, like staring at it, like, oh, it's so beautiful, right?
And it was glowing green or something like this.
It was like the suitcase in Pulp Fiction. You open it up, and it's
putting out some kind of Trankov radiation, there's uranium inside.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on the show today here, Matt. Where can people keep up with you?
Mostly on LinkedIn, actually. So find me there pretty easily, and look forward to having conversations there.
Awesome, cool. Well, thanks again, and stay tuned in. We're going to be doing more interviews from Coalesce here, so keep up with us on the YouTube channel and on LinkedIn. And until next time, bye.